Good morning, everyone. I think we're on our way to having a good attendance. So I think we'll get started. So thank you, firstly, all for joining the webinar. So my name is Harvey Choate. I'm the MD at Nexus. We're a integrated agency, but a firm belief that you can earn your stripes as a brand, and that happens through a number of channels. So we're channel agnostic when it comes to delivery and thinking. But what we're going to talk about today is how brands can tap into culture, and how being culturally relevant is critical for growth, critical for long-term sustainable brands that want to connect more deeply with consumers. So we'll kind of move through, but before we do, a quick sort of download on the agenda. So today we've got joining us Jim Carroll, the former chairman at BBH, fantastic speaker, brilliant mind. Bianca Spreda, who runs global social media at Red Bull, and has a really practical view of how brands can tap into culture. And Morten Toft Beck, the founder of Meatless Farm, which started 4 years ago, but is now one of the hottest brands in the plant-based market. So firstly, I'm going to talk a bit, which, probably out of all the speakers is the least interesting one, but I'll try my best. And then Jim's going to follow me. So that's kind of more sort of conceptual stuff. And then we're going to get a bit more hands-on, talking to Morten about the Meatless Farm, how it's founded, but then also to Bianca about Red Bull and how that brand really taps into cultural moments through social. And then we'll follow up shortly after with a Q&A. So you can ask questions. I'm not the most technically savvy person, but apparently there's a button you can press, and you press it and then you ask a question and then I will see it. And no naughty questions, please. I'm a human filter, so I'll try and take out any rudeness. But so as we sort of step into this, well, like I said, we'll talk a bit about sort of some of the conceptual thinking here, but also kind of lean into a piece of work that Nexus recently did that sort of brings to life cultural relevance. So what is cultural relevance? So from Nexus' perspective, there's two parts to it, and the first part is self. And when I say self, you as brand managers, marketeers, PR people, self means our brand, effectively. And there's lots of things that make up our brand, whether it's brand purpose, commercials, our values, product benefits, brand challenges, or I sometimes call them weaknesses, but get told off for calling them weaknesses, and our brand history. Where have we been? Where are we in our journey? Are we a kind of a startup brand? Are we more mature? Have we had negative press? Are we have a positive perception around us, or are we lagging behind competitors? And I think as brands often, and marketeers, we often put a lot of emphasis on consumer insight, understanding our customers, what they want, what their needs are, and probably less so on understanding ourselves as a brand and who we really are, and where we really sit within the culture we're operating in. Now, the second part is relevance. And relevance really is about not just customers, but our cultural context. So yes, what are our customers' aspirations, desires, and fears, but also what is the cultural context that we sit in? What's the general consumer mood? Often we get kind of caught in our own category rather than looking at the broader sphere of what's happening. And I think it's interesting this, and Jim will come on to talk. He's a great ad man, one of the finest. But so from a kind of ad perspective, they call it planning, and they look at that cultural context much more broadly. And I think from a PR perspective, sometimes we traditionally don't do that, and it's much more reactive. But actually at Nexus, we think bringing together that kind of ad planning, conceptual thinking, along with the kind of practical executions of kind of earned media, are super powerful. But it's brand perception as well. So understanding what people think about you. And you can garner that in many different ways. Sometimes it's intuition, and I won't profess that all of these aspects have data points. There are of course data points that are useful, but intuition plays a part. And I think that in-house agency side, both things, intuition is something we should invest in and encourage. And of course that comes with risk, but but still without risk, there is little reward. So where we sort of get to in terms of cultural relevance is actually finding a sort of shared position that brings together who we are, our values, with a consumer's and our cultural context. And we call that getting to a position of selfless relevance. For some brands, for some business, the notion of being selfless is a difficult one. Even for some humans, the notion of being selfless is a difficult one. But from our perspective, if you can find that place where actually it feels very selfless to consumers and it feels very authentic, you will build a platform that you can execute off. So that's a bit of thinking, right? Maybe a bit nuts. Maybe some of you are thinking this guy's a lunatic. But I'll just take you through now a quick case of some work we recently did that I think brings this to life. So I'll just take you back a few months ago, and hopefully you're not zoomed out now because we're literally a few minutes in. But actually we were all zoomed out. We'd all been doing quizzes. I mean, I haven't done a quiz for a long time, but we were zoomed out. We were probably newsed out. I know that even as a newsman, it started to get a little bit tiring seeing all of the data and repetitive things and mistakes being made and all those sorts of things. So if you look at the context of the sort of culture we've lived in for the last few months, 5 or 6 months, and we go back to July, that was sort of the sentiment. I'm zoomed out, I'm newsed out. But actually there was a sort of sense of freedom on the way. If we got to July and into August, we could suddenly go on holiday. We could suddenly maybe, go to Cornwall. We could go to the pub. We could stand half a bear apart now. We didn't have to stand a whole bear apart. Things were looking up. You could elbow each other in the street. All those positive things were happening. And there was a sort of newfound unity. And I'm sure a lot of you saw a lot of brands that did some good work, some slightly tepid, monotonous work around that unity of coming together. And it's a sentiment that actually, I think for many people was refreshing. And culturally, whether it's stuck with us, I'm not sure, but I think it's certainly a thing that people hope will stick with us. But there was also fresh division in the last few months, and a kind of a sense of kind of new thinking and change that is needed. So when we start to talk about cultural context, all of those things were super important as we embarked upon the program I'm just about to talk about. And yes, we were launching probably one of the most controversial products of the last 15 years. It stood for everything that probably the world didn't want to stand for at the time, and everything it doesn't want to stand for now, if we look back at it. We're much more into quinoa. Got that right. I was under pressure for that one. But if you look at the turkey twister and you look at the cultural context we were in, it kind of led us to a clear positioning, but one that wasn't simple to get to. And for those of you who know the turkey Twizzler, you will know that Jamie Oliver had the turkey Twizzler banished forever. And in fact, as a brand and as a sort of in a planning state of mind, if we're honest with ourselves and honest with ourselves as a brand, he probably did the right thing. For that, for our culture, for our kids, for our schools. And so it was super tempting to go after Jamie. And you'll see here, classic PR idea. Let's get a truck with a turkey Twizzler on it and stick it outside one of his restaurants, ironically now closed. We're going to raise the flag above it. But actually, was it the right selflessly relevant moment for us? And in fact, the more you looked at the cultural context around the Twizzler, there was already a relative degree of bitterness towards Jamie, of intense loyalty by our consumer base. So did we need to do that? Did we need to go after Jamie if, the world was in a place where we, like we said, we were zoomed out and used out, there's a sense of division, all those sorts of things? Or was it much more about positivity? And where we got to really in terms of getting to that culturally relevant moment for the brand and for the relaunch was that actually from a brand perspective, Bernard Matthews, they wanted instant sales. They wanted fun. They wanted it to be tasty. They wanted us to communicate that it was improved and healthier. They recognized there was some nostalgia around the brand, but typically also had a limited budget. This is one of those things that could go either way. And if we look at those sort of culturally relevant moments, there's doom and gloom, like we said, uncertainty, obesity and health was back on the cards. Boris was out running, for Christ's sake. I mean, the guys that run in 25 years. You had the Twizzler cult, so a petition signed by 30,000 people. We had the Jamie Oliver abduction, which is my way of saying it was, he got it banned. But there's a sense within the nation, within consumers, there was light at the end of the tunnel, and this brand had an opportunity to grab hold of that light and charge it forward rather than plunge into darkness and bitterness towards Jamie. So that's where we got to. And some of you may have seen the program, but it wasn't just that positioning that was important, or that strategic decision not to be negative. It was actually, a lot of it to do with actually starting to bleed creativity in. And Mark Ritson is currently supporting the Effie Awards, and if you can follow him on LinkedIn, he posts some great content, a much more sort of scientific marketing side of things. But a recent chart. So in terms of marketing effectiveness, what drives it? And I think as marketeers, PR people, we're all probably guilty of looking at some of the things here more often than we should. So targeting, reach, content are all the buzzwords I hear much more of in meetings than creativity. But I think this clearly demonstrates that actually it isn't just your positioning that's important, it's the creativity that you carry through with. Now, just to reinforce that, Binnett and Field also did a study back in 2013 of programs that were creatively awarded versus those that weren't, versus their effectiveness metrics. And again, you can see the disparity between those campaigns that potentially didn't have the strength of selflessly relevant positioning behind it and didn't execute creatively. And you have to do those two things together, really, to drive forward. They are not, they don't work in isolation at all. So the Turkey Twizzler, creativity. So what better way than to bring joy to the world than a 10-foot golden turkey Twizzler? Now, this isn't professing to be one of the most amazing advertising campaigns in the world or any of those things, but it's about a smattering of creativity, however you can do it, that will bring to life, and having a sense of fun and bravery depending on the program. The Turkey Twizzler time capsule, which, we could have sent product out, we could have sent a leaflet out, all those sorts of things. But the time capsule inspired lots of amazing content. So Lad Baby, if you know him, posted free actually, but just off the back of the creativity that was embedded in the positive positioning. And so these things drive results. So if you look at Google Trends, and this is one of the key objectives over time, you'll see back there in 2004, the most talked about time for Twizzlers was back then when Jamie Oliver banned it or abducted it, whatever you want to say. But actually, if you look on the right-hand side, that is the most recent cut where you can see where Jamie Oliver's ban is now just a blip in the Turkey Twizzlers history. And I think that's testament to the positivity of the campaign. So, but it isn't just the big moments. Of course, the Turkey Twizzler is a iconic product, and for a PR dream, because you're not pushing water uphill. But it's also some of those micro moments. So I'll just kind of micro cultural moments. So I'll just draw your attention to a case study of the first Cape wine. So this was a campaign effectively for one of the first low alcohol wines. And what it was built on in terms of a cultural moment was the fact that actually there was a growing behavior and a growing culture of women wanting to drink and wanting to chat, but not wanting to get drunk. So the first Cape proposition was perfectly designed, but actually the cultural moment that we tapped into for delivering that to market was around actually enabling people to have that chat. And creatively, we did that with Alicia Dixon. But again, I think it shows that, okay, there are big cultural moments around saving 2020. There are micro moments, cultural moments around, just wanting to chat in the garden and not get totally pissed. But, hopefully those two things demonstrate that cultural relevance isn't just about Pancake Day. It's about recognizing that there are bigger movements and bigger sentiments in our audiences. But importantly, also recognizing that who we are massively impacts our ability to tap into cultural moments. And if we don't know who we are, it becomes increasingly difficult. So there's three takeaways really from this first section. So one, be selflessly relevant. So find those shared moments and moods. Number two, believe in creativity, invest in finding it, take risks. Not always easy when you've got maybe a commercial too, or somebody saying, hey, that's not, you can't be creative, that kind of thing. But it does work, and hopefully the data from Mark Ritson shows that. And there is a time, so not everything needs to be a big campaign. Not everything needs to be TV and integrated and all this kind of stuff. It can be as simple as a turkey twizzler in a time capsule. And those three things, I hope, inspire you and give you something practical to take away. But there is a reason why I spoke first today, and that is because Jim and the rest of the speakers are very difficult to follow. So I will now pass on to Jim Carroll. So Jim is a former chairman at BBH, and we've known each other for a long time, and he's worked on some amazing campaigns. So Jim, I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Harvey. Yes, excellent. I am going to talk about zeitgeist brands, brands that capture the spirit of the age, if you like, brands that have cultural currency. And being a bit older than many in the audience, I grew up in the 70s, and my childhood was spent every night with the 5 kids. Mum and dad sat along on the floral 3-piece suite watching telly together. And this posed a challenge to our Springer Spaniel, Dylan. Dylan was full of energy, boundless enthusiasm for life, but loved being the center of attention. And when the Carroll family were spending the night watching 70s telly, he felt a little bit out of the picture, and he tried traditional dog methods of distraction. He scratched and pawed and barked, mostly earning a kick from dad, and he found it all very frustrating, until he worked out that the best way of resolving this situation was to sit underneath the telly. And so he could watch us, as he saw it, watching him. And maybe, therefore, he had taught me the first lesson in advertising before I moved on to that career, which is that the challenge for brands is not, as they do most of the time, to distract attention, to bark and paw and yelp. The challenge is to find the center of it and to participate in the general conversation, to join in, to find relevance. So Dylan taught me my first lesson on this topic. I worked for most of the 90s on the Levi's brand, and it was a great exemplar of a brand that participated in culture. The music would be in the top 10 every time. It would be much discussed, as were the boxer shorts worn by the talent, as was the talent itself. It was a campaign that shaped culture. And I think that was very much what the agency tried to do. And even when we were working on, for example, a margarine like Olivio, which was a yellow fat, as it's known in the trade, we determined that we wanted to talk about Mediterranean diet, about healthy long life, and we featured old people in the campaign. And the campaign, therefore, became part of the great debate about nutrition, long life, the Mediterranean, old people, etc., etc. I worked for a time on the Audi car brand, which participated in culture right from the start, actually, by using a German end line in non-German speaking areas, Vorsprung Dirk technique. And as an example of how, even with a long running campaign, there are challenges about continuing participation. We were working with a campaign that was all about black cars out of black. And these were the traditional semiotics of luxury. But we found that they had become quite conventional, and we felt at some point in the late 90s that we were becoming ordinary as a luxury brand. And what may seem as a small change became quite a significant one, because we stopped doing black cars out of black and started doing white cars out of white, because white is the colour of technology, modernity, futurism, not a cliched luxury goods colour. Let's see a white car out of white. There it is, yes. And that became the language of the campaign going forward. So zeitgeist brands, I guess, are brands that participate in culture, that contribute to the conversation, that join in. And you'd think from what Harvey and I have been saying that surely all brands seek to be zeitgeist brands, all brands seek to have some cultural relevance. But I don't think this is true. I've encountered in my career many brands that I would call introvert brands. They tend to be modestly talking to their own users and their own sector with their own conventions. And it's an insular conversation. It's very much determined by what we've always done, what the product is about, what makes us particularly different within our little sector. And I think I encountered a lot of clients over the years that said, look, I'd like to join in with culture. I'd like to be a zeitgeist brand, but that's okay for technology or for artisanal breads and beers. That's okay for health brands, but I'm not one of those sectors. And we used to say, well, you'll find that extraordinary brands have participated in cultural conversation well beyond those limits. So back in the day, Benetton, a knitwear brand, used to talk very publicly about diversity of its audience. OXO, which after all is just a gravy brand, initiated a very sort of public conversation about what the modern British family constituted. Persil, merely a detergent, was a brand that managed a discussion about child development and the role of play in a growing young kid's life. Dove, after all, just a soap, managed a very public conversation, a compelling conversation about the nature of real beauty and the representation of women in advertising. These were campaigns that fueled the imagination through the years that I worked in the industry. But I still see campaigns that do this kind of thing now. If you look at a brand like which is, after all, a brand that specializes in testing and recommending, and you might therefore think would be less relevant in the modern age where we get all of our recommendations from social media, etc. Which did a very compelling campaign that just exposed the risk and unreliability of fake reviews and suddenly became completely relevant in the conversation. Optrex, I came across an Optrex campaign, quite a small brand, and you'd say it was a brand participating on the margins of modern day life because it deals in eye health and dealing with the issue of dry eyes. But Optrex took dry eyes and said, well, it's not just a timeless condition that needs medical help. It's actually a condition that is exacerbated by excessive use of computer screens, and it repositioned Optrex as the modern day solution to screen eyes. So you can see that in the past and in recent history, brands that weren't obviously in zeitgeist sectors could become zeitgeist brands. And when I reflect on the kind of challenges that may be available to other brands, I sort of think, what if you were a coffee brand? Maybe you could be the original social network. That's what coffee houses were before the technology came along. If you were managing a tea brand, wouldn't you, rather than just talk as you've always talked about refreshment, why don't you talk about tea providing everyday mindfulness? If you're a shaving brand, why don't you save the world from the curse of hipsters? If you're a household cleaning brand, maybe your great value and relevance is that you're providing confidence in an uncertain world. And I used to say to all my strategists, if you're looking for a strategy and you're pitching for a brand, always use the Obama position. He talked about hope and change. Fundamentally, what he was doing was trying to find a positive engagement with the future. And I think any modern contemporary business needs to find a positive engagement with the future, a way of joining in the conversations that are happening in culture. And I think in conclusion that if you can't make yourself relevant, you actually will become irrelevant. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. That was fantastic. It's always great to hear you speak. So what we'll do now is, obviously, Jim, we'll take questions at the end. But Morten, welcome, and thank you for joining us. I know you're
Harvey.
Super busy man. Before we do move on, Jim Carroll does have an excellent blog, and I would definitely sign up to it and follow it. There's some super interesting stuff. But as we move on to Morten Toftbeck, so the founder of Meet This Farm, and an all-round brilliant gentleman, really, but has somehow managed in the last 4 years to build one of the fastest growing plant-based meat brands. So not only here in the UK, but now operating in 18 different markets. So there's definitely doing something right, I think, Morten. But really now we're just going to talk about the journey you've been on, and I know that it's been a kind of a longer journey for you because there's lots of stuff that's happened in the background, but I wanted to focus more really on kind of when you started to enter the market and what sort of sat behind the brand. So I remember meeting you and when we launched the brand and all those sorts of things, but for you, I suppose, why did you start the brand? What was behind it?
Yeah, well, thanks, Harvey, and hi everyone. Back in 2016, I was living in Ibiza with my family, and I've got 3 small kids, and my wife is living a vegetarian diet with the kids, and she felt there was a need in the market for something that wasn't there, some way of adding protein without killing an animal into a spag bowl easily. She was struggling with using 5 different types of beans and lentils in order to get the right vitamins and so forth. So sort of over dinner, we came to this conclusion that someone ought to make a minced meat product, but out of plants that would have the same nutritional benefits as meat, but without all the bad things. And at the same time, I guess if you're trying to do a business, it's a good idea to see if there's a market for it. And we felt that was the case as well. There was sort of a growing awareness of the link between climate change and the pollution from animal agriculture. I think most of us now are aware of this fact. We weren't 4 years ago, but it's changing really, really fast. So that's sort of all those things put together made me, instead of trying to invest in Beyond or Impossible, which was the 2 only brands that really were existing at that point in time, I decided to create my own. And 4 years later, here we are.
That's it. And what a journey it's been. And I think it was interesting, the point you make around climate change and all those sorts of things, because I think, so 4 years ago, certainly it wasn't so well known, but certainly when we launched the brand, it was becoming much more of a cultural moment. So we had the pink boat in London, we had Extinction Rebellion, their voice growing. And I recall when we launched the brand, that was quite a focus for us to tap into that kind of cultural movement towards environmentalism and changing our kind of view of how we consume things.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you're creating a brand, I guess it's important that you have something to say, that you are. I mean, in our case, we're basically challenging and changing the status quo. We're telling people, hey, just change your habits that you've had for a very, very long time, where you think that you need to eat some sort of dead animal 7 times a week. It's not necessary. There are other ways of going about everyday life and feeding your family and yourself. So So yeah, I mean, having a true voice and it's obviously something that's helped the brand develop. I understand it's not something everyone has. If your business is selling cigarettes or alcohol, you have a challenge to find something, like Jim said, something that is that makes sense and has a social purpose as well. We were lucky in that sense that we I guess as a business we got the timing right as well, and then we obviously got from you, Harvey, we got the right sort of help to launch the brand in the UK, which is where we initially set up the business and started it. So, and I think looking back at it, you feel the brand as much as I do, and that's obviously a very important part as well. That you need to make sure that people around you are just as passionate and engaged in your communication and in your brand values as you are yourself. That includes your agencies, your employees, and your customers as well. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting as well, because obviously we built lots of communications around environmentalism and all that sort of stuff, and recognize that as a motivator at the time for people. But I suppose as well, at the core of the brand is knowing within ourselves. I think you always said this from the beginning, that you weren't anti-meat, you weren't pro-vegan, you were just very much for people making small changes. And I think having that core belief has meant the brand can communicate on a different level to different audiences. Would you agree? Or
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, for something that is lingering, at least a few years ago, veganism was looked at as a very extreme lifestyle. We needed to make a stand and say, hey, we are not actually for vegans. We're happy if vegan eat the product, but they're a small part of the population. So we are looking to make this attractive to people that eat meat. And now the term flexitarians is very well used. It wasn't a few years ago. And I think that's one of the that's finding that purpose and your voice, and then just use some common sense. I'm not a marketing expert, and I think you Harvey, as a person, is also very good at bringing in the common sense into a marketing discussion, so it doesn't become too technical or too theoretical. As a non-marketing person, and you participate in creative agencies and social media agencies and PR agencies, and you sit in these meetings, and there's so many abbreviations that's flying around, and that sort of most of it went over my head. And I think you and I sat down at some point and just said, hey, let's just try to bring it back to basics. Let's use common sense and say, things like honesty, transparency, humbleness. Let's try to introduce those into the brand, because they are essentially values that we as people stand behind. And they're also quite a good way of I guess, standing up against what is a very, very powerful meat industry, who is not transparent, who is not honest, and we can be that.
Yeah, definitely, fantastic. And most recently, obviously, there's been a step change in communication. So you've been establishing the brand, and I think this is an important point, because as you establish a brand, you want to build your credibility and, like you say, honesty and transparency that helps you connect with people. But most recently, you've done we've done a campaign that's grabbed some attention. And I suppose shifted the narrative as the categories got more competitive. So I think if you agree, this campaign, I think, reflects the sort of cultural relevance of where the category is, by making it less of a taboo for meat eaters to eat less meat.
Yes. I mean, I got criticized the other day on a radio show, BBC, for trying to throw a low punch or make an easy point by using swear words, but which obviously we are not. We might insinuate it, but that is obviously the attention grabbing part of it. But the underlying importance, I think, is this thing of avoiding to be beige. We many times during the last 3 or 4 years been afraid of becoming, I think what Jim said was, avoid the introverted conversations. So inside the company, there is, as you grow a business from being a small team to being a bigger team, you will naturally bring in different personalities, and some have more corporate traditional careers where caution is probably more important than it is for me as an entrepreneur. So you sort of have to have these discussions inside the company of how you avoid corporate consensus and you force yourself to be brave. There are many examples of brands that have succeeded in that, and we obviously, I think, are adding to that list now. We're trying to say, hey, we want to be have a clear voice, and we don't want to be seen as base. So if it's provocative to insinuate that an old lady says this is a motherfucking sausage on a painting or poster, well, you know, let's have that let's have that as well, and then hopefully you know, provoke a bit of dialogue about plant-based food, and then bring in some other relevant points as the brand grows, points that are really important to discuss, which is our sort of, you know, moment of bringing social relevance into it, which is the climate change debate, which is the thing that's probably coming next for our brand.
Yeah, absolutely. Morten, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. What we'll do now is we'll move on to Bianca, and then obviously open the floor for questions. So if you can hang around, I would appreciate it. That'd be wonderful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bianca, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are
Good.
you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. So Bianca manages global social media at Red Bull, along with a wider team. But Bianca, we spoke yesterday about a few things, and obviously it would be great to get your sort of download on practically how you tap into socially relevant or culturally relevant moments.
Yeah, of course. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's great to hear from other experts. I have to say, I really like the ads. He came all the way to Austria, so I was even aware of these ads. So well done, Morten, for that. Yeah, so we talked yesterday about one of probably my favorite programs at Red Bull, and that is Red Bull BC1, which stands for Breaking Champion One. Is basically a breaking community, B-boys and B-girls from all over the world. Breaking is a tough one to get in to start with, because he was born from the streets, and he was never really keen on having any brands around. So one of the things that Red Bull has done really well is that they have been investing in this community for over 15 years now. It started small, and then he became bigger and bigger, and now he's probably the largest breaking community in the world. And what Red Bull does, they run different events throughout the year all around the world, from Nigeria to the UK, from the US to Austria. There are events in over 60 countries around the world. And those events are great for Red Bull itself. They're not sponsored by Red Bull, they're actually run by Red Bull. So you have people at a local level investing and creating these events for their communities. Sometimes these communities are a bit niche, sometimes are a bit bigger, but regardless of the size, it requires a really in-depth knowledge in order to have the right type of floor, for example, all the way to having the right backstage for the people to relax and be able to concentrate on the movement they're going to do. This is a really, really hardcore sport. It went from the streets, as I mentioned, to it's going to be one of these new sports in the Olympics. So you will see it on the screens very soon on your TVs. So yeah, we have events all over the world, and they're great because we sell tickets, but also we sell cans, we sell merchandise, and it's a great opportunity for marketing overall. You won't see any ads or any ATL about Red Bull BC1. All our advertising budget goes into events. That's the key of the event. And I will say 95% of the content that you see on the Red Bull BC1 social channels come from the events. So we have people backstage, we have people on the main floor, on the secondary floors where they do different competitions or classes. We have the Red Bull dancers as well there. So there will be people interviewing them for social channels to do takeovers on social media, like Instagram stories and things like that. So it's I will say the heart of most of the business, the events, and the fact that they know really well what an industry or a niche kind of group of people would like to do.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting because sometimes you see brands participating in kind of cultural events or those sorts of things. It can be a sort of sticker exercise, can't it? Let's stick our logo on the event, and then suddenly we're part of it. But I think what's interesting, what you said is, Red Bull actually organized these things. This is now, and because of that authenticity and that investment you make, you really connect with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So he actually presented a big challenge for us because during the pandemic, there were no events whatsoever. It was not safe to have that many people in a space. So then we had to move everything online. And it's funny that the picture that you pull or the website that you pull, it shows one of the efforts that we did, which is creating the e-battles. So you're still competing, but you are competing through a video. So like you either send a video and then the judges who are Red Bull dancers, B-boys and B-girls, will select the ones that go to the next round, and then you have to send another video. We also did Instagram lives with some of the dancers. So we had one dancer and we opened it to everyone to battle online. So we had people battling some of the best B-boys and B-girls in the world from the living room. One of them almost destroyed a lamp in the living room, but it was really fun to see because the level is quite good. But even if the level is not that good, it's a very nice community that aims to embrace anyone that's trying to learn this new sport.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really interesting if we just talk about selfless relevance again. This is, a position where Red Bull are investing in a community. It isn't just about you building your brand or building awareness. That's an output of your authentic investment in the community. And the way you celebrate athletes as well, you sort of professionalize it, don't you? I mean, I looked across the website and, it's like looking at the NBA or the Premier League, the athletes are really, you've given them a platform to show their craft and their art.
Oh, for sure. I think Red Bull was one of the first brands that actually did athlete marketing. So they were the first one taking a skateboarder, a snowboarder, or a dancer, a b-boy, a b-girl, and actually making them part of the company. That was something that wasn't really a thing before. People will skate on the streets, people will dance on the streets, but there was not that connection with brands. And it's one thing that Red Bull did or is mastering right now. And a lot of people are following, as you see, from Monster to other brands in other spaces. And they actually bring a lot to the brand. Like they are representing the brand, they wear branded content, they create a lot of content for us. And we have used them a lot, especially for TikTok. Any trends that come, we'll just like reach out to them, like, would you like to jump on this trend or take an approach to it? And if you go to the Red Bull Dance TikTok, you'll see a lot of the dancers just jumping on these trending hashtag and trending challenges and doing it on their own way.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it was interesting. I was looking, obviously always looking at your stuff, but a couple of months ago, you advertised for it was a social media role, I think, in your team, but you wanted that person to be a dancer and to understand the dance culture. And I thought that was super interesting. I think it goes back to the point around, tapping into cultural relevance isn't just about, a brand activation. It's about, who's in the company. And so you're looking for social media managers who can dance and understand the culture as well.
Yeah, 100%. That is probably one of the most challenging things that you have at Red Bull. You can't just hire someone that is really good at social media. It has to be someone that is really good at social media plus understands the project that they're going to be working on. Yeah. So for Red Bull Dance, we have not only B-boys and B-girls, but we also have people that were professional choreographers, for example, people that did hip hop, that did house. And that's kind of like the styles that we touch on. But it's the same for a skateboard. It's a person that actually fully understands the community and is part of the community. Being based in Austria, one of the most challenging parts is to find someone from surfing, because there's not a lot of surfing around here.
Yeah.
You will find people in Bali, you will find people in the States. So sometimes what we do, we have to, we wanted to make it extremely authentic. We will hire people and they will be based not in Austria. So the person that looks after the surfing community is actually a surfer in Bali.
Yeah, that's fantastic. But I mean, I think that's a great, maybe a forward looking thought really for other brands to go, well, actually, if we want to be involved in culturally relevant moments, you know, and like I said, there's some bigger movement ones, some smaller ones, but anything like sport or music or art, you know, are you working with the right partners? Are you bringing the right people in to understand it? I think it's obviously working, Bianca. So, you know, it's a good one, I think.
It's a lot of effort, I have to say, but it really pays off. Like having been in other companies and trying to do similar things, one thing that I see stops brand from actually embracing their full potential is that they will test, so they try something for a month or 6 months or even a year, like, oh, that doesn't work. It's really hard to get it right in 6 months or a year. Like you really need to think long term, think about 5-10 years in time. And if really doesn't work at that point, with 99.9% of the times is not the case, if you have the right people and the right partners, then then move on to something else.
That's it. And I think the takeaway from that really is that the closer to, you know, the cultural moment you are, the better you're going to deliver as a brand. You know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you think about Red Bull, it's an energy drink. Like Jim was talking before about all these brands that they had been involved in things that actually are quite relevant for what they do. But an energy drink is being involved in jumping out of the stratosphere, dancing on the streets, snowboarding, skating, even social projects. So the relevance is what you want to make out of it. And for us, our slogan at Red Bull is what makes everything make sense in a way, which is Red Bull gives you wings. Because for us, it's the platform to help people achieve their dreams or have their voice heard or do anything crazy like jumping out of the stratosphere.
That's it. Fantastic. And it's a great positioning that has lasted for a long time. I'm pretty sure I first heard it when I was just a young baby, you know, drinking a can of Red Bull. That's what I was doing. But Bianca, thank you very much. Hopefully you all found that really useful. So really you've had there sort of some conceptual thinking through to with Morten and Bianca's sort of practical aspects of how cultural relevance can drive the brand forward. So we've got about 5 or 10 minutes for questions. So I now have to do some technical things, which means I stop sharing my screen. I think if I click it, and I don't know if I am still sharing it or not. Oh no, stop share. It's a red button. There we go. And then if I go to gallery view, you can see all of us. So we've got a couple of questions here. So the first one would be interested to know what kind of consumer audience insights Morten and other speakers look at when planning a campaign, particularly in terms of which cultural moments they're engaging with. Jim, it might be good to go to you first on that one.
I would always be looking at where the change is going on in the category and beyond it. And I would talk to people that are leading that change. And conventionally, people have said that there's only change in fashion or youth or something like that, and that other sectors are fixed. But I would argue that all sectors change, and therefore all sectors have change makers, and they're the people I'd want to talk to.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's often a common misconception with insight, isn't it? That we're looking for some data points, we're looking for some, you know, harvest some social data. You know, often if you go to somebody who, you know, like Morten, you know, is you know, is changing the category in plant-based. If you go and talk to Morten about what he thinks is happening there and what's going to happen in the future, hey, it's better than any report you'll get, you know, and you can have a beer with him as well. So, you know, much better.
But I think Harvey, on the cultural relevance point, you also need to look at what cultures is it that you are addressing. I mean, sort of country-wise cultures. So there is a very different. Many companies will either have to pick some sort of macro cultural event, which Red Bull is good at. I mean, dancing, skateboarding, surfing is a global culture, subculture, whereas other cultures are maybe more micro-based or country-based. So when you are sort of, as Meatless Farm, for example, are active in now in 18 different countries, we need to try to find what is the common denominator, or do we go local everywhere and then spend huge efforts in terms of localization, or do we pick something that's culturally relevant across 18 different cultures, which is hard. That's another point.
Absolutely. So just moving on, so this one's for Bianca. So do you see any long-term changes on how the brand or Red Bull communicates to stay socially relevant post-COVID?
Oh yeah, we've seen a lot of changes, and I'm actually really proud of the team, because one thing that I noticed is that they have fully embraced the changes. Like, once we realize this is not the way we will be able to do things for a while, then is when we all got together and started a list of things, of everything we could do in order to bring that connections of the dancers, of the events with the consumers and the community in general. So even on Red Bull Music, we had like very big crews to film some of the series we produce. Because of Corona and all the pandemic, we have been actually started sending GoPros, and like whoever we were going to meet, they will film firsthand everything. And the result has been a lot better, to be honest. It feels more human. So I think the situation is there. It's about how you approach it. We try to get the best out of it. Some of the things that we're seeing now, like the split battle on Instagram Live, a lot of the things we will definitely carry on, because we just see in a different angle that also provides value to the community. So why stop?
Yeah, definitely. And culturally, maybe these changes will stick with us for a long time, or come in and out. We don't know. We've got a few weeks of freedom at the moment. So Morten, just a quick one here that's a bit more practical. So obviously, someone here, Morten, has asked, kind of keen to understand some of the thinking behind Meatless Farm's channel choices. So obviously we went on radio, I think earlier last month, and then obviously we did the drive-through. Maybe I can talk about the radio one on your behalf. So really the brand objective is awareness, and there isn't a particularly focused age demographic. What we're looking for is to drive awareness of the fact there is a meat alternative into different channels, and because of where the brand is, you're sort of testing channels at the moment. So I think sometimes when we look at the channel mix, we kind of ask why not more than why should we. So that probably answers that one. But more on the drive-through, I know you didn't manage to get there, but it certainly had an impact, right? I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was a great idea, great PR stunt as well. So well done, Javi. I mean, that was quite a good idea that you drove into the company. So and now I think it's something we can use in other countries and also other cities in the UK as well. I also think to align it with electric cars and the fleet of sort of branded cars we have driving around the streets, around the drive-through is a very good hookup as well. And then as you build a campaign now, and we're lucky to have the means now to sort of scream out louder, then obviously the associated things you can do with, as you say, radio or billboards, or even as we are now on national TV is all something that's helping drive the brand awareness, which is what this is. I mean, we want to do, like many other brands, I assume, have repeat purchase and all that stuff, but primarily what we want is people to go and try it, because there's still so many people that haven't tried plant-based foods and are just standing there in the supermarket counter and picking a regular pack of mints rather than trying the other one because it's new. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Jim, maybe just one for you. So regarding propelling your brand into the zeitgeist, is there a danger here, Ed asked, that you could appear that you're not authentic by raising awareness of something that's just bigger than the brand, for example, climate change?
Yes, and I think Morten talked about speaking with a true voice, feeling the brand, and I think whatever you do has got to have some authenticity, but you shouldn't be limited by just the day-to-day. I mean, I think the challenge when developing this kind of campaign is to ladder up, but to ladder up from who you are to a place that is bigger and more compelling. So You know, way back when, you know, Johnny Walker was all about success, and you'd celebrate a business deal by having a Johnny Walker in the airport lounge. And I think that in order to propel it forward, we elevated that to a more contemporary form of success, which is personal progress. So it is more about success of the mind rather than success materially, etc., etc. So I think there's obviously real concerns with walking onto inappropriate territory. But as long as it's true to who you are and it's true to what the brand's about, then I think you should do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, everyone loves a Venn diagram, but that knowing yourself and knowing the culture operating in it will allow you to find that space. And sometimes you will make mistakes. Sometimes you won't get it 100%, but you know, that fear of failure is either going to, you know, paralyze you. So if you get the sort of thought process as good as you can, go with it, I would say, and be creative too.
But don't you think, Harvey, that you need to also like be authentic to your own brand? So there are certain things you can't communicate about. So if you try to, you know, put on a different show, you lose the authenticity. So what Jim says about being authentic to who you are, you can still innovate who the public should see you as, but it's very difficult if you are, say, which the petrol industry are trying at the moment is to paint themselves green, which is something that's a massive challenge when they're still producing fossil fuels, for example. So
yeah, exactly. No, you're totally right. I mean, you know, and the thing is, consumers see it. You know, consumers are smart. They see when it's not authentic. They see when it's not right. So yeah, you absolutely have to line up. And sometimes that's not always about having all the answers now. Sometimes it's about saying, and I know the petrol industry, you know, it's a difficult position for them right now, you know, but I'm sure I can help them always. But yeah, I think, you know, if you set out that journey, like I think we have with Meatless Farm on some issues, you know, where we're not quite there yet, but we go, well, this is the journey to get there. That transparency is, you know, worth its weight in gold, rather than either glossing over it or pretending you are something you're not. You know, it's one of those things. This is quite a long question here. Let's try sort of read it out. So this is someone from Orchard Pig Cider. Hi Ross. He says they operate on the cusp of being both a craft brand and a mainstream brand. They live by the ethos of adding mischief to the mainstream, and part of that is offering consumer choice around being a vegan cider. Do any of the panelists have any insights on maintaining your brand truth as you scale up? Jim, I don't know, maybe you might have a thought.
Well, I think we would always talk with Levi's about fanning the flames of discovery. And I think that the critical thing that Ross faces is to sustain the relationship with the hardcore as you move on. So, I mean, this is back in old media times, but we would develop particular campaigns just for the cool opinion leaders who wore very specific forms of Levi's, whilst at the same time expressing their passion for the brand in huge, big television adverts. And I think, so the two things are, one is maintain a discreet dialogue with the people that are at the root of your brand. And secondly, as you expand, make that expansion consistent with the belief set that were at the heart of Orchard Pig.
Yeah, that's it. I think sometimes, more, you've probably seen this with Meatless Farm, there's probably always a temptation as you scale up to deviate, you know, because you go, well, that's a great deal, let's do that one. And I mean, with Meatless Farm, I think there's never been any compromise on your core beliefs of what you want to achieve. And I think you're right, Jim. You've got to stay true, because otherwise you will, as you said, become irrelevant. You know, it's an unsustainable way for a brand to connect.
Well, I guess it's.
Go on, Morten.
Sorry. No, I think in some issues, Harvey, it's about either you create, I would say, a divisive voice, or you create a unifying voice. And in some, so for example, if you're running a predominantly vegan scene brand, then obviously what we are trying to do is unify this and say, hey, there is no vegans or meat eaters. We're all just trying to eat healthier for a healthier body and a healthier planet. So you're sort of unifying and saying there is not this conflict between one on one side and the other on the other side. And that's obviously, but that is the challenge when you are moving into an area which is very opinionated. Such as veganism versus carnivores.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that's the interesting thing about meatless is you have really tried to address those two tensions by saying actually there doesn't need to be hate. Actually, if we all make small changes, a small group of people making big change is not going to change the world. A big group need to make small change, and I think that's really resonated with many meat eaters. So there's a couple more here just before we wrap up. So to all the speakers, I'll let any of you jump in. What do you think has been the most effective campaign you've been part of or that you've seen that's impacted or tapped into cultural relevance? Jim, I'm sure you've got a view on that. No?
It's like being asked your favourite record, isn't it?
It is. I mean, for me, you referenced Dove earlier, and I thought that was a fantastic campaign at the right time that delivered, what the brand was about, but also, was highly emotive and changed the way people think about themselves. I mean, I don't know if you agree. It was Morten, did you ever see that campaign?
Yeah, I saw that one. The one that springs to mind for me, and I think Dove was very good, and I still top of my mind when I think about sort of also feminism and equality and a lot of things that they touched upon of important sort of topics that are ongoing at the moment, have been for a while. I was just more closer to heart to my industry. I was thinking about Oatly, which recently has sort of made a big brand within the dairy or oats milk essentially, and they've done that by essentially that company was turned around by a marketing director that came into the company and said, hey, this is super boring. Whatever you're communicating is boring. The way your packaging looks, everything, you need to be brave and you need to change. And actually one voice, and then he built a department around it, has transformed this company into being a multi-billion dollar company now. So that's sort of, it's not a single campaign, but it's a campaign that's lasted, I would say, the last 3 or 4 years, where they really transformed themselves into something very different with a lot of humor and a lot of bravery. Considering the company has existed for 30 years, that's remarkable.
Yeah, fantastic. Is there anything, Bianca, have you got to add anything on that one, or should we jump to the next question?
No, I agree. The Dove one is definitely one that resonated. The other one that I can think of is actually Lacoste, fashion brand, decided to change the logo, which is this crocodile, into all these different species that they are in danger of extinction. So they have a whole collections with all these other animals just to raise awareness that, including the crocodile, all these animals when they cannot be there. So I thought it was a really nice way to not only raise awareness, but also have a conscious kind of like mindset for people that buy products and understand that, you know, it's a lot to take into consideration.
Yeah, definitely. No, I recall that one. It was a great one. So Kieran's just asked, is there a line that you can cross sometimes seeming too involved in the cultural conversation or becoming political or jumping on the bandwagon to stay relevant? I mean, I always say, if you can't credibly be selflessly relevant, then don't bother, because otherwise you will be seen as jumping on the bandwagon. But Bianca, have you had any examples where maybe Red Bull have got it wrong? They've,
Well, the thing is, Red Bull doesn't really touch any political topics because of what you just described. We are energy drink, we thought we should keep quite separate to any political issues. However, Nike, I think, is a great example of someone that is becoming a little bit more political, more vocal, especially around diversity, and doing a great job with it. And their content and their posts out there, they're spot on. Everything that they create clearly has a lot of great minds behind strategies, and they make a stand for the whole company, and they actually getting to a point where like a lot of brands are looking at them and being like, how can I be a little bit more like Nike? It's true that they're in sports and they have a wide variety of athletes, but the way they stand up for the values in this DNA is remarkable for sure.
I think, if I may add there, Javi, we recently had something quite interesting with the Black Lives Matters discussion, and where obviously a lot of companies immediately jumped on that and just basically said the same as everyone else, and we had internally a discussion about that and saying, hey, of course it's important for us, and of course, no need to go out and communicate that we support Black Lives Matters, and we support any sort of diversity of sexes and but if you are busy communicating something else and you're on another track, then it seems sometimes a little bit difficult to sidetrack yourself and just jump into something. So I think that lends itself to what you said. If you can't communicate something authentically, maybe better to pass on this one. But with the social media and how hard things drive right now, we, Meatless Farm, got really criticized. I got criticized personally for saying, hey, that because I didn't have a voice, then suddenly I was seen as not supporting the initiatives, which was just basically a way of, well, I think it's very difficult to maneuver a brand in these times when feedback is so raw as it is on social, for example, where you get criticized if you don't, and you get criticized if you do. So
yeah, that's it. Jim, have you got anything to add on that? Because I suppose that is, we talked about fresh division and all those sorts of things. Jumping on those very hot topics. I suppose, do you have a view from a brand perspective?
Yeah, I think certainly when you get into politics, it's about not just saying but doing. And I think with some of these issues, there's been a lot of saying and not much doing. So, I think what's great about the Red Bull story is that it's a lot of investment and activity and action on the ground. And I think the best campaigns are things that have big, high ground, principled themes that are culturally relevant, but involve proper action. So, promise less and deliver more. But it doesn't mean be silent. It just means talk when you've got something to say.
Yeah, that's it. No, I totally agree. And I think, I always say, don't just say stuff, do stuff. That's one of my favorite meeting lines. That's what I do. I do that and I walk out of the room with dry ice. I'm not joking.
Yes.
But
tell me about the board level representation. Tell me about the mentorship program.
Exactly.
Tell me about percentages. Don't express empathy. About it up to here.
Exactly, that's it. And interesting, there was a question on here about the diversity of this panel. Which is you get questions like that, and it says something around, this is 4 white men and a woman. As Nexus, of course, we support diversity and all those sorts of things. We're pushing towards being better, and I think actually the world having the conversation is the important thing. I think sometimes the attacks and the negativity around it maybe it makes people afraid to talk about it. But I think you're right. You've got to talk about things when you can say something.
But that's because bigotry is so easy to come about with social media. It's you just post a comment and you've expressed some stupid view, and there's a lot of that happening on social media, which obviously is a platform that we are all, every brand builder is very, very involved in that as well. So it's a sort of two-edged sword. Yeah, absolutely. That's really helpful. So I think probably that sort of wraps up the Q&A. So, I don't know if there's anyone on the panel wants to add anything or before we close down. No,
thanks for the opportunity.
Hey, look, thank you all. Thank you, Jim, Bianca, Morten. It's been a real pleasure. And I hope all of you out there watching have found it very useful. And please, I think my details are out there. Please reach out. It'll be great to stay connected. All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Very good.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.
Cheers. Bye.